Mike sat on his front porch one cool fall morning, enjoying his coffee and looking out at his new home. He had just bought this nice house in the fancy Oak Ridge neighborhood. At 55 years old, his graying hair and lined face showed just how hard he had worked during his 25 years as an FBI agent. He had finally retired 2 weeks ago, and boy, did he need the rest. He had spent years catching bad guys and solving big crimes all over the country. The morning was beautiful. He could smell fresh-cut grass in the air. Mike decided to go for his daily walk. He put on his favorite blue sweater, a goodbye gift from his old work friends, and went out for a stroll down his street. He had always wanted a peaceful life like this, so different from his exciting but stressful FBI days. As he walked, he saw kids' bikes lying on neat green lawns, and runners would give him a quick hello as they passed by. But Mike noticed something that bothered him. His neighbors acted strange when they saw him. Some would look at him twice, like they were surprised to see him there. Others would quickly cross to the other side of the street. Some would smile, but their smiles didn't look real or friendly. Mike knew what this meant. They didn't think he fit in with their fancy neighborhood. After years of studying people's behavior at the FBI, he could spot these little signs easily. When he turned onto Maple Drive, he saw a police car parked under a big oak tree. Inside was Officer James Miller, a young white policeman whose crisp uniform and shiny badge showed he was pretty new to the job. What worried Mike wasn't just seeing the police car, it was how Officer Miller watched him walk by, with a look that seemed unfriendly and suspicious. Marcus maintained his steady pace, his mind automatically cataloging details from years of habit. Miller's tense grip on the steering wheel, the slight forward lean of his posture, the way his hand hovered near his radio, all indicators of someone looking for trouble rather than protecting peace. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. After spending his career protecting people from genuine threats, he was now being viewed as one simply because of his skin color. The crisp morning air suddenly felt heavier as Mike, actually known as Marcus, heard the low rumble of the cruiser's engine starting up. In his peripheral vision, he saw Miller pulling away from the curb, moving at a crawl that matched his walking speed. The hair on the back of Marcus's neck stood up, not from fear, but from the familiar sensation of a situation about to escalate. He'd been in enough high-stakes operations to recognize the calm before the storm. Other residents began to take notice, peering through their windows or pausing their gardening to watch the scene unfold. Marcus could read their assumptions in their furtive glances, not seeing a decorated FBI veteran who'd protected their country, but instead whatever stereotype Miller's obvious suspicion suggested to them. The weight of their stares pressed against his shoulders, but his posture remained straight, dignified, unchanged. The cruiser's tires crunched slowly over fallen leaves as Miller maintained his parallel crawl. Marcus considered his options, drawing on decades of experience in diffusing hostile situations. He could confront the harassment directly, but that might play into Miller's hands. He could call out for witnesses, but that might escalate things unnecessarily. Instead, he chose to continue his walk, projecting an air of calm authority that had served him well in countless operations. Through the years, Marcus had faced down hardened criminals, terrorist cells, and organized crime bosses, but there was something uniquely frustrating about this moment. Those threats had been clear, their danger obvious. This was different. A subtle, insidious form of threat cloaked in the guise of authority, made more dangerous by its facade of legitimacy. The sound of Miller's radio crackled through the morning quiet. "Dispatch, we've got a suspicious individual on Maple Drive, African-American male, mid-50s, moving slowly through the area." Marcus's jaw tightened at the familiar code words, the way suspicious was being used as a proxy for something far more prejudiced. He'd investigated enough civil rights violations during his FBI career to recognize the pattern. A fresh wave of frustration washed over Marcus as he heard Miller's description continue. "Subject appears to be casing the area." The absurdity of the situation might have been amusing if it wasn't so dangerous. A retired FBI agent being profiled as a potential burglar on his own street. His hand instinctively moved toward his phone, where his FBI credentials were stored digitally, but he stopped himself. Years of experience told him that reaching for anything right now could give Miller the excuse he was looking for. The morning sun cast long shadows across the pavement as more patrol cars began to converge on the quiet street. Marcus could hear them approaching from different directions, their engines breaking the peaceful morning silence. What had started as a simple morning walk was rapidly transforming into something more ominous. The tactical part of his mind, the part that had kept him alive through countless dangerous operations, was already mapping escape routes and calculating risks. Yet beneath his calculated exterior, anger simmered, not just at Miller's obvious prejudice, but at the reality that his years of service, his dedication to justice, and his sacrifices for his country could be rendered invisible by the color of his skin. The growing tension in the air reminded him of moments before raids and stings, but this time he was cast in a role he never expected, the suspect rather than the law enforcer. As Marcus approached the intersection of Maple and Oak, he saw Miller's partner, Officer Sarah Chen, arriving in another patrol car. Her presence added a new variable to the situation. Through the windshield, he caught her questioning glance toward Miller, a flicker of doubt crossing her face as she assessed the scene. In that subtle expression, Marcus saw a potential ally, or at least someone who might question the unfolding events rather than blindly following Miller's lead. The morning had started with the promise of peace, but now stood on the brink of confrontation. Marcus Thompson, who had spent his career upholding justice, found himself caught in the crosshairs of the very system he had served. As Miller finally flipped on his patrol car's lights, Marcus steeled himself for what was to come, knowing that the next few moments would test everything he had learned in his 25 years of FBI service. The flash of red and blue lights painted the peaceful neighborhood in harsh colors as Officer Miller stepped out of his patrol car, hand already resting on his holster. Have you ever seen hatred in someone's eyes, the kind that burns through any attempt at reason? That's what Marcus saw in Miller's gaze as the young officer approached, each step heavy with unearned authority. "Hands where I can see them!" Miller barked, his voice carrying traces of eagerness that made Marcus's stomach turn. How many others had faced this same scene, this same rush to judgment? Marcus raised his hands slowly, each movement deliberate and calm. 25 years of FBI training screamed at him to take control of the situation, but experience had taught him that sometimes the strongest power lies in calculated restraint. Officer Chen emerged from her vehicle, her footsteps more measured, her expression clouded with uncertainty. The contrast between the two officers was striking, Miller's aggressive stance versus Chen's cautious approach. What makes two people, given the same badge and training, walk such different paths? "What's your business in this neighborhood?" Miller demanded, his chest puffed up like a peacock trying to intimidate a lion. The absurdity of the situation might have been laughable if it wasn't so dangerous. Marcus kept his voice steady, each word carefully chosen. "I live here, officer, 3 houses down on the left." How strange it felt, having to justify his existence in his own neighborhood. The sound of additional sirens pierced the morning air as more patrol cars arrived. Was this really necessary? 5 police vehicles for a man taking a morning walk? Chen's eyes darted between Marcus and Miller, her hand nervously adjusting her radio. She saw something her partner didn't, or perhaps refused to see. "Got any ID?" Miller's voice dripped with skepticism. The way his finger tapped against his holster sent clear messages. "I'm in charge. I'm the threat. I'm the one with power." Marcus reached for his wallet with slow, telegraphed movements. How many times had he been on the other side of this scenario, watching suspects, reading body language? Now here he was, being read all wrong. The growing crowd of neighbors peeked through windows and gathered on porches. Their whispers carried on the morning breeze, a mix of concern and judgment. Did any of them see him as a human being, a neighbor, a protector? Or was he just another headline in the making? "Sir, there's been a series of break-ins reported in the area," Chen interjected, her tone professional but tinged with something else. Doubt, perhaps? Conscience? "We're just following up on suspicious activity." The word suspicious hung in the air like poison. Marcus met her gaze, holding it steady. In that moment, something passed between them, a flicker of recognition, of humanity. Miller snatched Marcus's ID, studying it with exaggerated scrutiny. His lip curled as he read the address. This could be fake, he declared, ignoring the holographic security features that Marcus had helped design during his FBI tenure. The irony would have been delicious under different circumstances. Thunder rumbled in the distance, nature's commentary on the unfolding drama. A cool breeze carried the scent of approaching rain, but the air between Marcus and Miller remained hot with tension. How quickly a beautiful morning transforms into a nightmare when prejudice takes the wheel. "Call it in," Marcus suggested calmly, watching Miller's face twitch with annoyance at the implied challenge. "Check my details thoroughly. I insist. Sometimes the best defense is letting your opponents dig their own graves." Miller's radio crackled as he called dispatch, his eyes never leaving Marcus, as if expecting him to somehow vanish into thin air. Chen moved closer, her body language suggesting internal conflict. She'd noticed something. The way Marcus carried himself, perhaps. The confident calm that comes from decades of real authority. "Miller," she started, but her partner cut her off with a sharp gesture. The growing crowd of onlookers had their phones out now, recording the scene. Modern technology, both a witness and a weapon. Would these videos show up online later? Would they tell the whole story, or just the parts that fit someone's narrative? "Turn around, hands behind your back," Miller ordered, pulling out his handcuffs with theatrical flourish. The metal gleamed in the morning sun, a cold reminder of how quickly freedom can be stripped away. Marcus felt his pulse quicken, not from fear, but from the absolute absurdity of it all. Should he reveal his identity now, or wait for the perfect moment when the truth would hit hardest? As the cuffs clicked around his wrists, Marcus caught sight of his reflection in the patrol car's window. 25 years of serving justice, and here he was, being served something else entirely. But in his eyes there was no defeat, only calculation, patience, and the quiet strength of a man who had faced far worse and emerged victorious. Miller began his triumphant march back to the patrol car, practically strutting. But Chen lingered, her eyes fixed on Marcus's calm demeanor. She saw it now, the disconnect between Miller's suspicions and the reality before her. The question was, would she find the courage to act on what she saw? The patrol car's door opened with a heavy creak, like the gates of a story taking an unexpected turn. As Marcus was guided into the back seat, he allowed himself a small, knowing smile. Sometimes the best lessons come wrapped in the most uncomfortable packages, and this lesson was just beginning to unfold. The patrol car's vinyl seats crackled under Marcus's weight, the smell of stale coffee and cheap air freshener making his nose twitch. Funny how the mind notices these little things in moments of crisis, like the broken clock on the dash stuck at 3:47, or the small St. Michael medallion dangling from Miller's rearview mirror. Life's little ironies, the patron saint of justice watching over this injustice. Through the mesh divider, Marcus watched Miller's neck turning an angry shade of red as he argued with Chen. Their voices were muffled, but their body language spoke volumes. Chen kept glancing back at Marcus, her forehead creased with worry, while Miller's hands chopped the air in sharp, defensive gestures. Ever had that feeling when you know someone's fighting about you, but you can't quite hear what they're saying? That knot in your stomach that grows tighter with each passing second? The radio squawked to life with updates about a robbery across town, but Miller ignored it. Instead, he yanked open the driver's door and slammed it shut with enough force to make the whole car shake. Something wasn't right. Marcus had driven this route thousands of times. They should have turned left toward the station 3 blocks ago. But here they were, heading down Palmer Road, toward the old industrial district. Chen's patrol car followed at a distance, her hesitation visible in the growing gap between their vehicles. You know that moment when your gut tells you things are about to go sideways? When every instinct honed over years of experience starts screaming at once? Marcus felt his FBI training kicking in as he noted every turn, every landmark. The old steel mill, the abandoned warehouse, the railroad crossing where the gates hadn't worked in years. Each detail cataloged, each possible scenario mapped out in his mind. The handcuffs bit into Marcus's wrists as Miller hit a pothole, deliberately by the smirk visible in the rearview mirror. "Comfortable back there?" Miller's voice dripped with false concern. "Hope you're enjoying the scenic route." Marcus stayed quiet, watching Miller's eyes in the mirror. There's a certain look people get when they think they're in complete control, when they believe they're untouchable. Miller had that look now, and it was more dangerous than any weapon. The car slowed to a crawl beside an overgrown lot littered with concrete blocks and rusted machinery. Chen's patrol car had fallen behind, hidden by a bend in the road. Perfect spot for something to go wrong, wasn't it? No witnesses, no cameras, no help in sight. Just the empty windows of abandoned buildings staring down like hollow eyes. "Get out," Miller ordered, yanking open the back door. The morning air had turned chilly, or maybe it was just the cold knot of anticipation in Marcus's stomach. Standing there, surrounded by urban decay, Marcus thought about his daughter's words at his retirement party just weeks ago. "Dad, promise me you'll stay out of trouble now." "Sorry, baby girl. Looks like trouble still knows how to find me." Miller circled him like a shark, that same hungry look Marcus had seen in countless suspects' eyes over the years. "Not so high and mighty now, are we?" Miller's breath smelled of mint gum and stale coffee as he leaned in close. No fancy neighborhood to hide behind out here. The irony of it all almost made Marcus laugh. Almost. Here he was, a man who'd brought down international crime rings, being lectured by a rookie cop with a power trip. A distant door slammed, making Miller jump. Chen had finally caught up, parking her car at the lot's entrance. Her face was a mask of uncertainty as she approached, hand resting nervously on her holster. "Miller, what are we doing out here?" "This isn't protocol." "Good question, Officer Chen. Real good question." The tension crackled like static before a storm as Miller turned to face his partner. "Stay out of this, Chen. Go back to your car." But Chen stood her ground, her boots crunching on broken glass as she took another step forward. Sometimes the smallest acts of courage come from the most unexpected places. The sound of another vehicle approaching sent Miller into a panic. His hand flew to his weapon, eyes wild with sudden fear. Marcus recognized that look, the look of someone realizing they've gone too far to turn back. Through the chain-link fence, a dark sedan appeared, moving slowly, deliberately. The window rolled down, revealing a face Marcus knew all too well from his FBI days. Inspector Sarah Martinez from Internal Affairs. "Well, well, looks like this little detour just got a lot more interesting. Have you ever seen a house of cards collapse? How each card falls in perfect sequence, taking down everything around it?" That's what happened to Miller's confidence as Martinez stepped out of her car, badge already in hand. Sometimes justice works in mysterious ways, and sometimes it shows up in an unmarked sedan just when you need it most. The morning sun finally broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the empty lot. A perfect backdrop for a scene Miller never expected. The day his bad choices finally caught up with him, and as Martinez approached, her heels clicking steadily on the cracked pavement, Marcus allowed himself a small smile. Because sometimes, just sometimes, the tables turn in ways no one sees coming. Martinez's arrival had rattled Miller, but like a cornered animal, that only made him more dangerous. You ever watch someone's face when their whole world starts crumbling? The way their eyes dart around, looking for escape routes, the slight tremor in their hands? Miller's face was doing this strange dance between fear and rage, his composure shattering like thin ice on a warm day. "Drop your weapon, Miller." Martinez's voice cut through the tension like a knife, but Miller's hand only tightened on his gun. The rusty chain-link fence rattled in the wind, nature's way of adding percussion to this dangerous dance. Marcus could feel the cuffs digging into his wrists, but his mind was racing through scenarios faster than a computer. Funny how years of FBI tactical training never quite prepare you for being the hostage instead of the rescuer. Chen had backed away, her face a mixture of horror and betrayal as she finally understood. See, that's the thing about corruption. It has a way of hiding in plain sight until suddenly it doesn't. Miller's previous arrests, his suspicious reports, his late-night patrols, all puzzle pieces finally fitting together in Chen's mind. The realization hit her like a physical blow. "You don't understand," Miller's voice cracked, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool morning air. "These people, they come into our neighborhoods thinking they own the place. Somebody has to maintain order." The words tumbled out, each one revealing more of the poison in his mind. Marcus had heard this speech before, in different words from different mouths, but always with the same ugly heart. A candy wrapper skittered across the broken concrete, drawing everyone's eyes for a split second. Isn't it strange how in moments of extreme tension, your mind notices these little details? The way sunlight caught the wrapper's metallic surface, the sound of a distant train whistle, the faint smell of diesel from the nearby trucking yard. Miller's backup piece appeared so fast it seemed to materialize from thin air. A small .38 pulled from his ankle holster. The move was desperate, unprofessional. His hands shook as he pointed it at Marcus, then Martinez, then back to Marcus. "Everyone shut up and listen," he screamed, his voice echoing off the abandoned buildings like a twisted chorus. Martinez stayed cool as winter frost, her weapon steady. "Think about your next move very carefully, Miller. Internal Affairs has been watching you for months. Every traffic stop, every suspicious person report, every detour like this one. We know about the others." Others? Marcus's mind clicked pieces into place. How many innocent people had taken the same ride? The morning sun cast harsh shadows across Miller's face, highlighting every twitch, every bead of sweat. His eyes had that wild look people get when they realize they're trapped, not just physically, but by their own choices. "You don't get it," he spat, desperation making his voice crack. "These neighborhoods used to mean something. Now they're letting anyone in. Someone has to protect our way of life." Chen's radio crackled to life. Dispatch asking for location updates. The sound made Miller jump, his finger tightening on the trigger. Everyone held their breath, time stretching like taffy. One wrong move, one sudden sound, and this powder keg would blow. "Your way of life?" Marcus spoke for the first time, his voice calm as still water. "Tell me, Officer Miller, what exactly are you protecting? The right to terrorize innocent people? The power to play judge, jury, and executioner?" Each word landed like a body blow, making Miller flinch. A crow landed on the fence, watching the scene with beady eyes. Nature's witness to humanity's drama. Miller's gaze darted between his hostages, his plan unraveling faster than cheap cotton. The weight of his choices seemed to physically push down on his shoulders, making him hunch like an old man. "You could have been one of the good ones," Miller whispered, and the raw prejudice in those words hung in the air like poison gas. "Why'd you have to buy in that neighborhood? Why couldn't you just stay where you belong?" Marcus felt a lifetime of similar encounters, similar words, similar prejudices roll through his memory. But this time was different. This time, the tables were about to turn. Because sometimes karma doesn't just knock, it kicks the door down. The sound of approaching sirens filled the air, growing louder by the second. Miller's face went ghost white as he realized his time was running out. His backup piece wavered, his composure cracking like thin ice. The moment stretched like a rubber band ready to snap, everyone knowing that what happened next would change everything. And in that frozen moment, as Martinez's backup raced toward them, and Chen's hand moved toward her radio, Marcus caught Miller's eye. There was something almost pitiful now in the younger man's gaze. The look of someone realizing they've dug their own grave. But pity wouldn't stop what was coming. Justice, real justice, was finally catching up. Time has a funny way of slowing down when death stares you in the face. For Marcus, each heartbeat seemed to last an eternity as Miller's trembling gun barrel pointed at his chest. The rusty taste of fear mixed with something else. Was it pity? Here stood a man so consumed by hatred he'd forfeited his entire career, his future, all for what? The right to play God in a uniform? Martinez's team emerged from the shadows like ghosts, their movements precise and practiced. Each footstep crunched on broken asphalt, a deadly choreography of law enforcement closing in. Miller's eyes darted around like a cornered rat's, desperation rolling off him in waves thick enough to choke on. 6 complaints in 3 months, Miller. Martinez's voice cut through the tension. All black residents, all in upscale neighborhoods, all with the same story. Detours, threats, missing dash cam footage. She took a step forward, her badge catching the morning light. "But you got sloppy," Started believing your own lies. Never thought to check who you were really dealing with, did you? A helicopter thudded overhead, sending pigeons scattering from their perches on the abandoned warehouse. Sunlight filtered through broken windows, casting prison bar shadows across Miller's increasingly pale face. You know that moment when someone realizes their whole world is about to implode? That's what played across Miller's features, frame by horrible frame. They don't belong here, Miller's voice cracked, his words tumbling out like a confession. These neighborhoods, my father patrolled these streets for 30 years. He kept them safe, kept them. He couldn't finish the thought, but the ugly truth hung in the air like smoke. Kept them white. Chen had moved to Martinez's side, her face a mask of disgust as she finally saw her partner for what he was. The missing evidence, the convenient camera malfunctions, those routine patrols that always seemed to target certain residents, I should have seen it sooner. The guilt in her voice was thick enough to cut with a knife. Marcus watched Miller's finger twitch on the trigger. After years in the FBI, he knew the telltale signs of someone about to break. The shallow breathing, the microscopic muscle spasms, the way sweat gathered at the temples despite the cool morning air. Any second now. Your father's time is over, Miller. Marcus spoke softly. Each word weighted with 25 years of fighting exactly this kind of prejudice. The world's changing. You can either change with it or end up exactly where you are now, surrounded by the consequences of your own hatred. A distant church bell tolled, its deep resonance adding gravity to the moment. Miller's gun hand started to shake harder, tears mixing with sweat on his cheeks. You don't understand, he whispered, but the words sounded hollow even to his own ears. I was protecting people. Protecting them from what? Martinez stepped closer, her voice sharp as broken glass. From a retired FBI agent taking his morning walk? From families trying to live their lives in peace? From the American dream you swore an oath to defend? The truth hit Miller like a physical blow. His backup piece wavered, then slowly lowered as the fight drained from his body. Sometimes the hardest battles aren't won with bullets or fists, but with the simple, unstoppable force of truth. Martinez's team moved in with practiced efficiency, disarming Miller as Chen stepped forward to remove Marcus's handcuffs. The cold metal fell away, leaving angry red marks that told their own story of injustice. But it was Miller's face that truly showed the price of hatred. Empty now, hollow, like a man watching his whole world burn down around him. As other officers led Miller away, Marcus caught a glimpse of his reflection in a broken window. The morning sun painted everything in harsh, honest light, the way truth often does. In that moment, he wasn't just seeing himself, but every person who'd ever faced discrimination and lived to see justice served. Martinez touched his arm gently, her eyes full of professional concern. We've been building this case for months. Your morning walk just gave us the final piece we needed. She paused, a slight smile touching her lips. Though I doubt Miller would have tried this if he'd known he was messing with one of the FBI's most decorated counterterrorism agents. Sirens wailed in the distance, more backup arriving too late to a battle already won. But maybe that was fitting. Some fights aren't won with force or numbers, but with patience, dignity, and the unstoppable march of progress. As Miller disappeared into a squad car, Marcus thought about all the others who'd faced similar prejudice without the shield of a badge or the weight of federal credentials to protect them. This victory wasn't just his, it belonged to all of them. In the aftermath of Martinez's revelation, something snapped inside Miller. It's strange how desperation can transform a person in seconds. His face twisted into something barely human as he broke free from the officers holding him, diving for his dropped weapon. Ever seen pure hatred take over someone's eyes? It's like watching a soul disappear. If I'm going down, you're coming with me. Miller's scream echoed off the warehouse walls, his fingers wrapped around the gun, swinging it wildly between Marcus and Martinez. That's the thing about cornered rats. They bite hardest when they have got nothing left to lose. The morning sun caught the barrel of Miller's gun, a deadly wink of metal. Marcus's mind flashed to his daughter's face, her last text message. Love you, Dad. Stay safe in retirement. Funny how life throws curveballs when you least expect them. Chen moved first, shoving Martinez behind a concrete barrier. Miller, stop! You're making it worse. Her voice cracked with emotion, the pain of watching someone you trusted reveal their true colors. Must be hard realizing you've been backing up a monster all these months. Marcus stayed perfectly still, his FBI training kicking in like muscle memory. He caught Miller's eye, saw the tremors running through the younger man's body. Think about what you're doing, son, Marcus said softly, like talking to a spooked animal. There's a difference between ending your career and ending your life. The sound of multiple weapons being drawn filled the air, that distinctive click-click of safeties coming off. Martinez's team had their guns trained on Miller, but he didn't seem to care. His eyes were fixed on Marcus, blazing with a hatred born from years of prejudice. You people think you can just walk in and take everything, Miller spat, tears streaming down his face. Sweat dripped from his chin, his uniform now wrinkled and stained. My father would be ashamed of what's happening to this town. Your father would be ashamed of you, Marcus replied, each word landing like a punch. Sometimes the hardest truths are the simplest ones. Everything happened in a heartbeat. Miller lunged forward, his finger tightening on the trigger. Marcus dove left as Martinez's team opened fire. The morning erupted into chaos, gunshots echoing off brick walls, shouts filling the air, the metallic smell of gunpowder mixing with fear. When the smoke cleared, Miller lay clutching his shoulder, his weapon kicked away by Chen. The look in his eyes had changed from hatred to disbelief, then to something worse, understanding. Sometimes the hardest fall is the one from your own moral high ground. Martinez's team moved in quickly, securing Miller as medics rushed forward. Chen stood back, shaking her head slowly. All this hate, she whispered. And for what? Marcus brushed dirt from his clothes, feeling every one of his 55 years. A young officer offered him water, hands shaking slightly. Word had spread about who he really was. Funny how respect changes once people know your credentials. The morning sun had fully risen now, casting harsh light on the scene. Miller's blood stained the concrete, a stark reminder that hatred often hurts the hater most of all. As they loaded him into an ambulance, his eyes met Marcus's one last time. Empty now, defeated not just by bullets, but by the weight of his own choices. Martinez touched Marcus's shoulder gently. You okay? Such a simple question for such a complicated morning. Marcus nodded, watching the flashing lights reflect off broken windows. Sometimes being okay means surviving to fight another day. The crisis had passed, but its echoes would ripple through the department for months to come. As Marcus watched Miller disappear into the ambulance, he couldn't help but wonder, how many other Millers were out there, hiding behind badges and prejudice? The thought sent a chill down his spine, despite the warming day. The battle was over, but the war, that was just beginning. And Marcus Thompson, retired FBI agent, found himself right back in the fight he thought he'd left behind. Some calls to duty don't care about retirement papers. The morning felt different now, like waking up from a bad dream. News spread fast through the police ranks. That's Marcus Thompson, FBI legend. Whispers bounced around as officers stared at the man they'd almost helped Miller destroy. Funny how a badge changes things, isn't it? One minute you're a threat, the next you're a hero. Martinez sat with Marcus on the back of an ambulance, sharing a cup of coffee that tasted like cardboard. Miller wasn't working alone, she said quietly, checking no one was close enough to hear. We've found a group of cops across 3 districts, all playing the same game, targeting successful black families who move into nice neighborhoods, making their lives hell until they leave. Marcus sipped his coffee, thinking about all the families who didn't have an FBI badge to protect them. Regular folks just trying to live their lives, getting pushed around by bullies with badges. The thought made his stomach turn. Chen walked over, her eyes red from crying. Must be hard when your whole world flips upside down. I should have said something sooner, she said, voice shaking. The special patrols, the way he picked his targets. I knew something was wrong, but I kept quiet. Sometimes the hardest thing is speaking up, Marcus said kindly. But you did in the end. That counts for something. Her small smile showed how much those words meant. More internal affairs cars pulled up. Men in suits stepped out, carrying boxes and files. Looked like spring cleaning had come early for the police department. Martinez smiled, a wolf smile. We've got names, dates, recordings. By tonight, a lot of bad cops will be turning in their badges. A young black officer walked past, stopping to stare at Marcus with hope in his eyes. Marcus saw himself in that look. 30 years younger, full of dreams about changing things from the inside. Some fights never really end, do they? They just pass from one generation to the next. Miller's partner in another district showed up in handcuffs, his face pale as paper. 4 more arrests followed. Each cop caught in Martinez's net looked shocked, like they couldn't believe their little game was finally over. Funny how bullies look smaller when their power gets taken away. The police chief arrived, his face gray with worry. Bad cops don't just hurt people. They hurt the whole system, make good cops' jobs harder, make people lose trust. The chief looked at Marcus like a man who knew his department needed serious fixing. Martinez handed Marcus a thick file. Your morning walk blew open a 3-year investigation, she said. Miller was dumb enough to target you, but smart enough to help us catch his friends. Sometimes bad luck is good luck in disguise. The sun climbed higher, warming the cold morning. Marcus watched more cops being led away in cuffs, thinking about change, real change. Not just arresting a few bad guys, but fixing the system that let them thrive. We'll need your help, Martinez said softly. Your voice, your experience. People will listen to you. Marcus nodded slowly. Retirement would have to wait. Some calls are too important to ignore. Chen stood straighter now, like a weight had lifted. I want to help too, she said. I want to make things right. That's how change happens. One person standing up, then another, then another. As morning turned to noon, Marcus thought about his quiet retirement plans. Sometimes life has other ideas. Sometimes the biggest fights find you when you're just taking a morning walk. 3 months after that life-changing morning walk, Marcus stood before a crowd of new police recruits. Looking at their young faces, he saw hope for real change. Some things hit different when you've lived through them, don't they? Miller and his friends are in jail now, Marcus told them, his voice soft but strong. But this isn't just about bad cops getting caught. It's about good people choosing to do what's right. He smiled at Chen, now teaching ethics at the academy. Funny how life works. Sometimes your worst day leads to your best purpose. The police department looked different now. New faces, new rules, new hope. Martinez's investigation cleaned house. 13 corrupt officers gone. More changes coming. But the real change? It was happening in hearts and minds, one person at a time. Remember Officer Chen? She started a program helping cops understand the communities they serve. It's not us versus them, she tells her students. It's just us, all of us together. Simple words, but they work. Marcus never did get that quiet retirement. Instead, he found something better, a chance to make real change. These days, he works with Martinez, training cops to be protectors, not predators. Every morning walk should be just that, he tells them. A walk, not a fight for dignity. The old neighborhood changed too. Now when Marcus walks down the street, people wave. Kids play freely, families feel safe. Even the old ladies who used to peek through their curtains now sit on their porches, sharing smiles and stories. But here's the thing. This story isn't over. It's not just about one bad cop or one brave man or one morning that changed everything. It's about all of us, about the choices we make when we see something wrong. What would you do if you saw someone being treated unfairly? Would you stay quiet, look away, or would you stand up, speak out, make a difference? This isn't just my story, it's your story too. Because somewhere right now, someone is taking a morning walk. Someone is facing prejudice. Someone needs you to be brave. Share this if you believe in a world where everyone can walk freely, live peacefully, be treated fairly. Share it if you want your children to grow up in a better place. Share it because sometimes the simplest actions, like taking a stand, raising your voice, or just sharing a story, can change everything. Remember, change doesn't always need a badge or a gun. Sometimes it just needs one person brave enough to say, "This isn't right." Will that person be you? Drop a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from. Share your story, because every voice matters, every story counts, and together we can make sure everyone's morning walk is just that, a peaceful walk in their own neighborhood. Like, share, and subscribe if you believe in justice. Let's make this story heard, because the more we share it, the more we can change. One morning walk at a time. This is Marcus Thompson, retired FBI agent, still fighting for justice. And this is your call to join the fight. What's your next move?